This video explains the Diablo 1 any percent single player hardcore glitchless rogue run on PC performed by Xavier_SB. This run is likely the current world record, but it is not 100% clear whether it falls within the rules of the category or not. I will explain this in a moment. The goal of an any percent run is to beat Diablo on dungeon level 16. Hardcore means we are not allowed to load a previous save, so we cannot scout the map in one direction and then load a save to explore the other direction more quickly. More importantly, hardcore also means that death usually ends the run, unless you can manage to kill Diablo after death, for example with a firewall. Rogue simply refers to the class we play as. Glitchless is a tricky term because there are a few tricks that may seem like glitches but have been deemed as tricks or exploits. For simplicity's sake, think of it as no duping. In a normal playthrough of Diablo, these would be your steps to beating the game. On every dungeon level, except for the last one, you want to find the stairs down to move on. On dungeon level 4 you have a 2/3 chance of having a quest that would require you to obtain Octan's Tavern sign. If you don't have it, you just move on. On dungeon level 13 you have a 50% chance of having to find the Steel Tome to open the way forward. On dungeon level 15 you need to find Lazarus' stuff and bring it to town in order to access Lazarus' lair. In there you open 2 books, step on a teleporter, kill Lazarus and leave. And finally you enter dungeon level 16, where you will have to pull 1 lever at the top, 1 on the right, followed by 2 on the left, and finally you can kill Diablo. In an ideal speedrun, these steps look a little different. We're still looking for the stairs down on every floor. However, we're also trying to find certain spells, namely phasing, telekinesis, mana shield, and firewall. On dungeon level 4 we still have to maybe deal with Octan's Tavern sign. However, if we have phasing, we can skip having to find the Steel Tome in dungeon level 13. Lazarus' lair plays just the same. We have to open the 2 books, step on the teleporter, kill Lazarus and leave. On dungeon level 16 we only have to open 1 of the 2 levers on the left. We can either do this with phasing or telekinesis. After this we go to town and right back to the dungeon. This will open Diablo's chamber and we can kill him. If we do not acquire telekinesis or phasing, we might have to fall back to the normal method. Mana shield is the best defensive option in the game and firewall is the best offensive option, which is why we want those 2 as well. Throughout the run I will put notes with some additional info, like the names of tricks or stats of certain items in this convenient empty space above Xavier. The formatting is not the prettiest because it's so narrow, but I wanted to avoid blocking gameplay wherever possible. Also, if there's too much text, Xavier's face will unfortunately be temporarily covered with text. The run is done on Diablo version 1.09 without the Hellfire expansion, which is the latest version that still works with modern versions of Windows. 1.09b fixed some audio issues on older versions of Windows, but doesn't work on newer ones. An older version isn't used because there were some annoying glitches in it, and the 1.09 version doesn't fix any of the relevant speedrun tricks. The game's played without the Hellfire expansion, mainly because Hellfire adds the warp spell which teleports you to the nearest set of stairs, which would significantly trivialize the speedrun. To my knowledge, there's currently nobody actively speedrunning Diablo Hellfire. The timer starts after you're done creating your character. The first thing Xavier does is running to Pepin to buy 2 health potions with the 100 starting gold. He will also look at the well in town to see whether he got the poisoned water supply or Leoric quest. You can see here the well is clean, so that means he got Leoric. While Xavier runs to the Cathedral, here's a quick version of how quests work. Most quests are in a quest group and the game will randomly decide which of those quests you get. If he gets the poisoned well, he knows that he won't have Leoric. It's always one of the 2. Another quest group is the Butcher, Octan's Sign, aka Snotspill, and Garbad, but he will always have 2 of those. He got the Dying Townsman, meaning he got the Butcher. This tells him that there's a 50-50 chance on getting Snotspill or not. On dungeon level 1 there's only really 2 things he cares about: finding the stairs to level 2 and libraries to acquire spellbooks. The experience from monsters is very low and thus not worthwhile. There's some useful spells you can find, but most important ones can only drop in D level 3 and onwards. He will attack a fallen one to get him out of the way and also to scare away other fallen ones, because their AI just tells them to run away when an enemy near them dies. He will just be looking for stairs so he can move down to level 2. The first 4 levels of the dungeon, also known as Cathedral, follow certain map generation rules. The most important one is that the stairs will always spawn towards the bottom. If you divide the map into 9 tiles, the stairs will always be in one of the checkmarked tiles. Remember that you can always pause the video or rewatch parts of it if it's too much information being presented too quickly. So here you will just quickly grab the staff in hopes of getting something useful on it once he identifies it later. Gold is needed throughout the speedrun, but it is much more efficient to just sell valuable items instead of spending time picking up a lot of small piles of gold here. Gold piles that can just be picked up along the way are definitely welcome though. Whenever you level up, you gain 5 stat points that can be distributed among 4 attributes. Strength, which is required for most gear and increases your damage with weapons. Dexterity, which is required for bows, gives you more chance to hit, more damage, and also more armor class. Magic, which gives you more mana, is required for some spells and increases your chance to hit with spells. And Vitality, which increases your health, but this is pretty much just a noob trap. You will be spending his stat points on magic because magic is very strong in Diablo 1. The main problem is that you need to find the right books to get the spells, but basically he's just banking on finding them. So here he just gets lucky and finds the stairs to level 3 pretty soon. Unique monsters have twice the HP of a normal monster. While they do give a guaranteed drop that is at least magic rarity or a book, they don't give more experience. Since Xavier's damage is rather low currently, he skips this one. Instead he finds Leoric's tomb, which he will gladly enter. Leoric's lair is a pretty good area for speedruns because the skeletons give pretty good experience compared to how easy they are to kill, and you will also get some guaranteed magic items. So Xavier will be running through here taking out the skeletons so he can operate a lever to get access to a small side chamber and grab some of the loot. While Xavier is clearing out the lair, let me introduce you to two of the most important concepts of this speedrun. H-walking and S-walking, or horizontal walking and south walking. When you're walking horizontally, so from the left to the right or right to the left, you cannot be hit by projectiles. This goes for you as well as enemies. So if there's a group of archers, if you just walk horizontally, you will never be hit. South walking allows you to do something similar but with melee hits. When an enemy is swinging at you, but you're moving downwards, so either straight down south or southeast or southwest, you will walk out of the hit and you will not be hit based on how the game's code works. If you're walking upwards, you will be pulled back to the tile you were running away from and you will be hit. So in summary, if there's enemies that fire projectiles, if you can walk horizontally, you will be able to avoid them. If there's melee enemies, you'll want to walk downwards to avoid their hits. In this game, normal armor only gives you armor class, which only reduces your chance of being hit by non-magic things. Armor does not inherently reduce damage taken. The chance to hit for arrows is mainly increased by dexterity and character level and decreases with distance to the target. The chance to hit for magic works differently though. It increases with your magic stat and decreases the higher the target's monster level is. For the detailed formulas, check Jarrow's guide linked in the video description. So here you can see Xavier grabbed the items and now he's just leaving because fighting Leoric is not worthwhile. He drops Leoric's crown, which sells for a decent amount of money and also gives lifesteal, but the lifesteal only functions with melee attacks, so it's not useful for Xavier. And since this is a speedrun, we don't have time to fight Leoric. While Xavier tries to find the stairs, let me explain the main aspects of Diablo's economy. Each item has a fixed price at which the vendor will sell it to you. When you sell an item to a vendor, you will always get 1/4 of the price, rounded down. Despite this, the main source of gold is selling items and not picking up gold. Normal rarity items are usually worth around 50 gold and thus not worth bothering with, but magic items can be sold for hundreds, thousands, and if you're really lucky even tens of thousands of gold. The price of each item is determined by the base item combined with the affixes. The only exception is unique items, which just each have a fixed value set by the devs. The inventory of Griswold, who sells most types of gear except staves, refreshes partially every time you level up. Adria works differently. Her inventory changes whenever you enter the dungeon, so with enough patience you could reroll her wares until you get what you want. Loading the game will also reroll her items, but that's not allowed in this category. She sells magic stuff, so staves, scrolls, books and mana potions. Pepin sells healing items, but aside from his infinite stock of health potions, we don't care about him. Opening chests is something Xavier will only do if they're close enough to his path. Most of the time they contain nothing or something minor like a potion. But if you're lucky, like Xavier was on the chest right before the stairs, you could get something potentially great, like a ring. Here he will replace the armor with the newly found one because he wants to keep the cape for later on. Since he won't be going to town very often, he won't really have the option to repair gear. And if your gear reaches 0 durability in Diablo 1, it breaks. And if it's broken, it's gone. There's no bringing it back. So here Xavier immediately finds Snotsbill, which is great. You will need to talk to Snotsbill to activate the quest, but before he does that, he will be using the contentious trick that makes us unsure whether this is a world record for the category or not. He will be using the healing scroll and then pick it up as it's being cast to cast the healing spell for free, but also keep the scroll. Now he has to run around the block in order to pick up Ogden's Tavern sign. In this game, shooting at an angle that is not a cardinal or ordinal direction is very unreliable due to how the game handles angles. To counteract this, Xavier tries to predict the enemy and shoot at the next good tile the enemy is walking to. The tavern sign is guarded by several uglies, also known as overlords. They take some time to kill and are not really worthwhile usually. The problem is if you don't kill them, there's a good chance you'll get swarmed, so it is very risky to just run in there. So Xavier opts to kill some of them here. And here you can also see the aforementioned south-walking in action. Whenever the overlord swings, he will be walking downwards to avoid being hit. If you haven't noticed already, Xavier's audio is muted so you can better listen to my explanations. But the music you're hearing is the Diablo soundtrack for whichever area Xavier is currently in. So that way you still get to enjoy this game's awesome soundtrack. It will be a little bit until the next explanation is needed. So from now on I'll share some fun facts if there's nothing else to explain. These are not important for understanding the speedrun, so if you're already overwhelmed by the amount of information, feel free to just ignore whatever I say when you hear fun fact. This game came out on December 31st, 1996. The final two overlords can be left alive because those are not too difficult to avoid. It only gets problematic when there's too many of them. Remember that the south walking, as the name implies, only works downwards, so since we have to move upwards to escape this area, we cannot avoid the hits, which is why Xavier decided to kill most of the uglies. Fun fact. Diablo was originally designed to be an XCOM clone, but partway through development they changed it to real time, in less than a day. He can now either talk to Snotspill, who will then immediately turn hostile, or he can go to town, which he opts to do, with the town portal scroll with the previously explained free casting trick. The town portal spell will create a portal back to Tristram that will stay open until the creator of the town portal steps through it from the town to go back to the dungeon. And since this is single player, this effectively means that Xavier can use it to go to town once and then back to the dungeon. If you talk to Snotspill, the exit to level 5 will open, Snotspill will attack you, but you won't get anything. If you talk to Ogden, the same will happen, but you will also get the Harlequin crest, which is a unique helmet that gives you less damage taken from enemies, which is incredibly valuable in this game. First of all, because it effectively increases your HP by taking less damage, but also because the hit stun, so whether your character will flinch when being hit and be interrupted, is based on the amount of damage you take relative to your character level. So if you reduce the damage you take, you will be hit stunned less often. This means you can navigate more easily, or if there's an enemy next to you attacking you, you will be interrupted less when trying to fight back. In town, he will also stock up on some healing potions at Pepin in order to stay alive in the dungeon. The ring turns out to give +7 to vitality, which is just a nice safety buffer, and most importantly 14% increased chance to hit. Note that you can wear unidentified items in this game, but they don't provide any of the magic bonuses until they are identified. So an unidentified armor would still give you armor class, but an unidentified ring doesn't give you anything. Also note that most items will have a higher repair cost after being identified, so if you think that you might end up using the item, it's better to repair it first. He also checks Adria's inventory for any useful scrolls or books. The ideal spells we will want to have throughout the run are Phasing, Mana Shield, Firewall, and Telekinesis. Unfortunately, there's nothing particularly worthwhile this time. Another very subtle thing happened about a minute ago that I couldn't fit in because there was so much else to talk about. When Xavier went to town and first talked to Griswold again, there was actually some dialogue. This means that Xavier got the Magic Rock quest and he will actually look for it because the reward is a ring that he can either use or sell. On dungeon level 5 he wiggles around his cursor trying to find the Magic Rock, which is usually around the stairs. It's not here, so he will just move on. Scrolling the map overlay is limited by the level's layout, so by trying to scroll it, even without having explored the level, Xavier gets a good idea of where he is on the level. This dungeon level 5 has stalkers, an enemy type that turns invisible, so he'll have to run back a little for safety. They do give very good experience though, so this is not really a time loss. Dungeon levels 5 to 8 are part of the Catacombs, which as you can already tell look different but also follow different map generation rules, and don't have an easy rule to find the exit like the Cathedral does. Now that he has killed enough of the enemies to significantly reduce the risk of being swarmed and body blocked, he will just move on and continue exploring the floor. On dungeon levels 5, 9 and 13 you can also find stairs directly up to town, but those are not really necessary if you have enough town portals. Note that once again, he will always try to walk south in order to avoid melee hits. Fun fact. Normally dialogue, like for quests from NPCs, stops playing if you try to walk away. But if you open the menu via the button in the bottom left and then close it, you can continue walking around with the dialogue still playing. He's carefully checking this room because there could be an archer firing squad that can deal ridiculous amounts of damage very quickly. Fortunately, it's only some melee dudes, so he will just quickly clear them out in order to access the tomes, which might contain some books. One of the skeletons just dropped a scroll of mana shield, which I will explain in just a moment. There's 3 ways of casting spells in Diablo. You can either use a scroll, which is single use, unless you use the free cast trick, which Xavier has already previously done in this run. You can find a staff, which has a limited amount of charges, but can be recharged by visiting Adria and paying her. Or you can find the book to permanently learn the spell and cast it at the cost of mana. He gets a scroll of healing, which pretty much serves the same purpose as a healing potion, and a scroll of town portal, which will be useful later on. Now Xavier uses the free cast trick with the mana shield scroll to cast it. In Diablo 1, any damage you take while having mana shield is removed from your mana first. This effect persists until you change floors, go to town, or run out of mana. So pretty much as long as you keep refilling your mana, you keep your mana shield. Once it runs out, you would have to recast it though. If mana shield is learned through a spellbook, it will also give a 1/3 damage reduction. For now he's just trying to save his health potions by having mana shield up, but later on we will see mana shield enable something even more overpowered. On dungeon level 5, if you're lucky, you can get the quest for Arcane's Valor, which gives you the strongest body armor for a speedrun, as it gives you a lot of reduced damage taken from enemies and also has very high armor class. And even if you don't want to use it, you can still sell it for a lot of money. The quest group for Arcane's Valor has 3 quests in it and you always get 2. Magic Rock, Valor and Halls of the Blind. Since Xavier already knows that he has the Magic Rock, there's a 50% chance on finding Arcane's Valor. If Griswold hadn't mentioned the rock, Xavier would know that he definitely has Valor and thus would go out of his way finding it, but with the 50% chance it's not worth checking the entire floor for it. It's just a nice bonus if he comes across it. Fun fact. If this run makes you want to replay the game, you can buy it on GOG.com and then download Devolution X, a Diablo port with loads of bug fixes and quality of life features like higher FPS, a stash or item highlighting. Just note that while Devolution X is great for playing casually, it is, at least at the time of making this video, not allowed for speedruns. As Xavier continues exploring the floor and farming some experience, I will point out some important differences between the single player and multiplayer of this game. In single player, you do not have access to Nightmare or Hell difficulty, except through some glitches, but it's not intended to work that way. And also, in single player, the game is a lot easier. So if you're replaying the game and you feel like it's easier or harder than you remembered, maybe it's because you played multiplayer or single player, respectively, back then. In multiplayer, the monsters have more health, you have less quests, and also there's a cap on experience you can gain for a single kill, based on your character level. Whereas in single player, you can just skip a bunch of floors, and as long as you can kill the enemies, you will be getting the full amount of experience. Another interesting difference between single player and multiplayer is that in single player, the dungeon doesn't reset unless you select new game with the character. Also, shortcuts to town are not tied to character level, but must be opened from the dungeon once and then stay open, unless you reroll the map by selecting new game. Fun fact. Each class has different speeds with different weapon types. The rogue is the fastest with bows, followed by warrior, and sorcerer is the slowest with them. For spellcasting, sorcerer is the fastest, rogue second, and warrior the slowest. For melee, the orders warrior, rogue, and sorcerer. Here Xavier interacts with the thaumaturgic shrine. It doesn't really do much. The shrine will reset all chests on the floor, so you can open them again, but in a speedrun setting this is not really relevant. Xavier finds the stairs to level 6, so he checks for the magic rock again, which, as previously mentioned, usually spawns around the stairs. He doesn't find it, but decides to fight the monsters instead of immediately descending to the next level. Unique monsters will always drop a magic item, unique item, or a spellbook. If you can kill the unique monster fast enough, it's usually worth it, because either the item might be directly useful to you or it might just sell for some nice amount of money, and we will need some money later throughout the run. Just to give you an idea, if Adria was to sell the Book of Mana Shield, which is one of the spells we really want, it costs 16,000 gold, and Xavier is currently sitting at 1,470. A Book of Phasing would cost 3,500, a Telekinesis book is 2,500, and Firewall is sold for 6,000. If Adria decides to sell these books, of course. Normal potions cost 50 gold and full potions cost 150. This goes for both health and mana. So if you want to fill your entire inventory with full potions, you'd need 7,200 gold. Fun fact: the Hellfire expansion was not developed by the same people that developed Diablo 1. It was actually done mostly behind their back and they did not approve of it, which is why Hellfire is not canon in Diablo 2. The red icon on the right means that the body armor is very low on durability and thus about to break, which happens right now, so Xavier puts on the other armor he saved earlier. Killing Shadowdrinker here actually turns out to be worth it as he drops the Staff of Telekinesis. The way staffs work is that they give you access to a spell while you have the staff equipped, but they have a limited amount of charges. So this staff obviously gives you access to the Telekinesis spell, which allows you to remotely interact with items. Most importantly, that means you can pick up items without having to walk all the way over there, and you can interact with doors, levers and such, even through walls. This will allow him to save on some walking later on. The library drops him a Book of Lightning, which is a nice spell to have to deal with certain enemies, but it is nowhere near as important as the other 4 spells. Now he heads on to dungeon level 6 to make some progress once again, because after all, this is still a speedrun. Here Xavier will scroll the map once again to get a better understanding of where he is on the dungeon level. In a moment we will see Xavier make use of a flaw in the AI by 4-tiling them. 4-tiling means standing a certain amount of tiles away from a corner, at most 4. The enemy AI, if they are ranged, will think that they can attack you, so they won't move any closer. But they can't, so they will just be standing there inviting you to kill them. However, you can hit them, making the engagement with the enemy completely safe, as long as there aren't too many extra enemies around you who might actually try to move in closer and then start hitting you. Fun fact: each class also has a unique skill that can be used infinitely for free. The rogue can disarm traps on objects like chests and doors, but since that takes time and most of the traps can also be dodged, speedrunners don't bother. The sorcerer can recharge staffs, which is really useful, but the downside is that it also decreases the maximum charges on the staff. The warrior skill works similarly, but for repairing armor and weapons at the cost of maximum durability. Fun fact: in this game, light radius doesn't just determine how much you can see, it also determines how early monsters see you. If you lower your light radius enough, you can basically sneak past most monsters. The downside is that you can't see them either, unless you use infravision, which shows all enemies for a while, regardless of light radius. There's videos by Xavier about this, which are linked in the video description. Here Xavier realizes that there's quite a few enemies in this room, so he runs backwards in order to hopefully line them up to kill multiple of them with one lightning cast. They don't really play along that well, but they're not much of a threat anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. We will just take them out, get the experience and the gold and move on. Fun fact: there are 2 unique items in Diablo which are references to the game's main developers. David Brevik's last name can be found on Sivert's cudgel, if you spell Sivert backwards and swap the C for a K. They changed it because it sounds better that way. And Schaefer's hammer is named after both Max and Eric Schaefer. Fun fact: the name of the game does not directly come from the word for the devil. David Brevik lived near Mount Diablo in California and thought the name was cool, so he decided that he wanted to name a game after it. Here you will see telekinesis in action for the first time. Xavier will just pick up the shrine without having to walk over there. The Gloomy Shrine gives +2 armor class for every helmet, armor and shields you have, but -1 maximum damage on all weapons. Fun fact: Diablo's map RNG works based off your operating system's time and date. If it is set to the 1st of January 2039 or later, you will always get the same seed, meaning you will always get the same layout. Fun fact: if you want even more Diablo fun facts and information, there's a post-mortem on the game by David Brevik from GDC, also linked in the video description. Xavier performs another free cast trick with the healing scroll to get his health back for free. Here Xavier will use telekinesis again to loot the library without having to go in there. He finds a book of phasing, which is a teleport in a somewhat random direction. I will explain it in more detail in just a moment. And on this library book he actually finds Book of Mana Shields, which I've already previously explained is the spell that allows you to use your mana pool as health pool, and also gives you a damage reduction. The way that phasing works is that it randomly teleports you in one of 4 directions, either at the top of your screen, at the bottom, at the left, or the right. However, you can influence this by blocking certain positions. So if there's a wall on the left where you would teleport to, that position is not valid, thus you cannot be teleported there. So if you set it up properly, you can only phase in 1 or 2 directions, and thus significantly improve or even guarantee your odds. Xavier just paid Kane to identify the staff, which turns out to give +12 to mana. This is a very good bonus since more mana means he has more effective health with mana shield, he can cast more spells, and full mana potions give him 12 more mana. Here Xavier uses up all of his health potions because he doesn't need them anymore. Thanks to Mana Shield, mana potions now serve the same purpose that health potions previously had, while also having the added benefit of being fuel for spells. He could sell all the health potions, but their sell value is so low that he decides to unleash his inner college student and just chugs like a madman. This makes inventory management easier as there is only one type of potion needed from now on, and also he doesn't have to go to Pepin anymore. He now fills up most of his inventory with mana potions and also buys a Scroll of Firewall, whose purpose we will see very soon. He throws out a few scrolls in town as he doesn't need them right now but might need them later on. The town is effectively a giant character stash. Once back in the dungeon, Xavier will free cast a firewall with the scroll and attempt suicide. He fails, so fortunately the run continues. On a more serious note, this is the most important trick in the entire run. Xavier is now at 8 health, which is less than his character level of 11. And due to some funny coding in the game, when your health is below your character level, you cannot be hit stunned. It's not really a problem, because if you are that low on health, you will die in one hit anyways. Unless you have mana shield, of course, in which case your mana functions as your extra health pool. So as long as Xavier keeps his health below his character level, which Xavier can easily do by not using any healing potions or spells, he will never be hit stunned by enemies. The only way he could regain his health is if he levels up. For example, if he's surrounded by enemies and he can't escape them and has to fight them, he might gain a level up. But having mana shield, especially this early on, significantly eases up the run, as you only need to manage one type of potion, you take less damage, and if you set up the low HP trick, you cannot be hit stunned. Because of all of that, Xavier will avoid killing enemies from now on. Level ups aren't needed, as his effective health pool is already big enough thanks to Mana Shield's damage reduction, and if he gets lucky enough to find a Book of Firewall, that spell will be providing all the damage that he needs. In this upcoming part you can see the power of Mana Shield combined with phasing and telekinesis. Xavier is looting the library while avoiding to fight any enemies. He just runs around, and if he gets surrounded he will just phase away. If he didn't have low HP trick, he would be hit stunned and constantly interrupted when trying to phase. If he didn't have phasing, he would have to kill some enemies and thus level up, losing his low HP trick. And if he didn't have telekinesis, he would have to run into the library. This room contains the Halls of the Blind, which is where you can find the Optic Amulet. However, you first need to find and read a book in order for the Optic Amulet to spawn. The Optic Amulet is a nice to have on speedruns if you can come across it without too much of a detour. The main things it gives you is -1 damage taken from enemies and +5 to magic. However, as Xavier hasn't found the book yet, he will simply skip this quest. And thanks to Mana Shield, he's already immune to hit stun anyways. As the Halls of the Blind are part of the same quest group as the Magic Rock and Arcane's Valor, this tells Xavier that there was no Valor to be found on dungeon level 5. As you always get 2 out of the 3 quests of this group. Finds another library and checks if it contains a useful book. And he happens to get lucky and get the Book of Firewall, which is the final important spell for speedrun. When you cast Firewall, it will put down, as the name implies, a wall of fire that lingers for a certain amount of time based on the spell level. The higher the level, the longer it will last, which is usually not useful in speedruns because it might also block our own path. Firewall is such an important spell because you can stack firewalls, so you could cast 5 firewalls in the same place. One firewall already does pretty good damage, but if you have 5 of them, that's obviously 5 times as much damage. So you can just stack the firewalls and have enemies run into it and die pretty much immediately. Even if they're fire resistant, it is just that much damage that it still outperforms almost every other spell, except maybe Chain Lightning. Since Xavier has all the spells that he needs, he's just looking for the stairs down now. The next quest group contains 3 quests again. Zar the Mad, who can spawn on dungeon level 8 in a library. You'll get some books from him, but he will turn hostile, though it is usually worth it to kill him if you come across him. But as Xavier is already on dungeon level 9, you can see that he didn't come across Zar. On dungeon level 9 you can find the Black Mushroom. The reward for this quest is a +3 to all attributes, which may sound pretty good on paper, but the quest requires a lot of going back and forth between town and the dungeon and thus is not worth it in a speedrun. The third quest in the group is the Anvil of Fury. This one can spawn on dungeon level 10 and just requires you to pick up the Anvil of Fury and bring it to Griswold. As a reward you will get a sword that sells for a lot of money, so if speedrunners come across this one they will pretty much always pick it up. In a moment you might spot a book lying next to the stairs down. This is not a spellbook but part of the Black Mushroom quest, which is why Xavier ignores it. Remember that Mana Shield only lasts for the current floor. And since Xavier is on 8 HP, he will have to do this immediately whenever he enters a new dungeon level, because if there's a single arrow flying at him, he will just be dead. In the caves, the stairs will always spawn leading top left. According to the previous, or maybe still current, world record holder Zizek Commentator, the highest chance of finding the stairs is along the top left wall. But you can sometimes get what runners call troll layouts, where the stairs are, for example, in the bottom right of the map on a small piece of a wall sticking out. But since the top left wall has the best odds, that one is usually checked first. If it wasn't for the HP trick, I would probably explain how the different enemies work and all the various strategies to dealing with them, but since Xavier can't get hit stunned, the enemies are pretty much all the same to him. Since Xavier has already permanently acquired the Fireball spell via the book, he throws out the scroll to have more room for other things later on. His dungeon level 11 is incredibly lucky as he finds the stairs to 12 here right away. Level 12 is the last floor of the caves, afterwards you enter Hell. There's nothing really noteworthy on dungeon level 12, let's find the stairs as quickly as possible so he can progress. Fun fact, you can H-walk through a firewall to avoid taking damage. While it isn't the correct technical reason, you can think of firewall like a stationary projectile. For dungeon levels 13 to 15 there's some special properties. The map is always symmetric along these red lines. So exploring one quarter tells you the entire layout. And stairs can only spawn in rooms that are big enough. In this example, there's only 4 possible locations for the stairs to be in. Since Xavier already has all the spells that he needs, he's just buying some potions from Adria. You can hold down Enter in a vendor's menu to repeatedly buy the first item on the list. In Adria's case, a mana potion. But since a normal mana potion only randomly refills about 1/4 to 3/4 of your mana, Xavier buys full mana potions instead, which, as the name implies, fully refill your mana. He quickly buys a lot of them by alternating between left-clicking on the full mana potion and then confirming the purchase with Enter. He picks up another town portal scroll he threw down earlier, so he can return whenever he needs to. The next quest group consists of 2 quests and you always get one of them. The first one is the Wallet of Blood on dungeon level 13. If you get him, you will have to find the Seal Tome to open his room, which contains the stairs down, unless you employ the speedrun strat of simply phasing into his room. The upsides of having the Wallet of Blood are that you know exactly where to go, as his chamber is always at the top of the floor. In addition to that, he is also surrounded by armor racks with high value armors that you can try to steal as you go past him. If you don't have the Wallet of Blood, you'll have luck done on dungeon level 14. But as this quest requires you to first find him, then speak to him, and then find something on dungeon level 15, and then go back to him, it is not worth it. Despite giving you a helm that gives you plus 50% to all resistances, and it sells for almost 16,000 gold. He will now phase into the chamber and briefly pause the game. If he didn't pause the game, the Wall of Blood would have to finish his speech before he starts attacking. And as the Wall of Blood blocks the stairs downwards, we want him to move immediately, of course. We skip him and all of his minions because we still do not want to level up, because a level up would give us back our health. Here we can see Xavier scroll the map yet again to help his orientation on the dungeon level. Dungeon level 15 is the duplicate floor, which I will explain in a moment. The short version is that Xavier knows exactly where the stairs down are, so he immediately walks towards the pentagram, which is the equivalent of the stairs on dungeon level 15. He also happens to get super lucky and find Lazarus' staff right next to the pentagram, so he grabs it and heads to town, which is necessary to open Lazarus' lair. So what is a duplicate floor? You can get the exact same floor layout on consecutive floors of the same type, even on multiple floors in a row, but never across different types. In other words, you can't have level 9, which is the first level of the caves, be the same as level 8, which is the last level of the catacombs. A duplicate floor has the same layout, so stairs, walls and libraries will be in the same place, but it can have different enemies. While the exact details and limitations are not known, you could theoretically get something ridiculous like level 7 and 8 being the same, followed by 9 to 12 all being the same, and then 13 to 15 also being duplicates. The town portal was placed exactly where the portal to Lazarus' lair will spawn, allowing Xavier to enter it immediately. For the Lazarus quest, which is required to continue, you have to interact with the tome on each side, then go back to the entrance to get teleported to Lazarus. After killing him, you go back to the entrance yet again in order to leave. Phasing isn't supposed to work in here, but by hovering the cursor over the magic circle, Xavier can cast it anyway. Since the player isn't expected to phase, the spell behaves a little different in here. It will always teleport the player next to the tome, so Xavier casts it as soon as he can see it. In a moment, Xavier will tap out of the game in order to skip a cutscene. This is only necessary due to how he runs the game. Most people can simply tap out during the cutscene, but Xavier's game will crash if he does that. Since the alternative is losing time, it will look a little weird in 3, 2, 1, now. Even though you can't see it, his character is now walking to the platform which tries to initiate the cutscene and then teleports the character to Lazarus. He then starts stacking firewalls on top of Lazarus and then pauses the game to once again skip the dialogue just like with the wall out of blood and then immediately runs away and tries to exit while Lazarus just burns in hell in the most literal sense possible. Once Lazarus is dead and he's back on dungeon level 15, the way down to dungeon level 16 is open. Usually, you have to go to the top and interact with a lever, go to the right, interact with a lever, go to the left, interact with another 2 levers, and then go to the bottom and fight Diablo. However, since he has telekinesis, he can't just interact with the lever on the left, and because of a little bug, if you go to town after having interacted with 1 lever, Diablo's chamber will be open, even though you'd normally have to open 2 levers. This lever trick is actually considered a glitch by several community members, but due to how easily it can happen even on accident, it has been decided that this one is okay. With Diablo's room now open, Xavier will head there and try to draw out Diablo, preferably without alerting too many of the monsters that stand around Diablo. He uses the lightning spell to aggro only 1 row of enemies instead of everyone by running up to Diablo. He then runs into a corner to prevent Diablo's knockback from functioning and starts spamming firewalls for Diablo. He continues putting down more firewalls and using mana potions to refill the mana that is being depleted by him casting firewalls and Diablo hitting him. Here Xavier runs out of potions and dies. However, the firewalls end up killing Diablo. While he isn't allowed to load, Diablo is dead, so the objective of the run is achieved with a time of 39:50. Due to the hardcore nature of the run, it is unlikely to even finish a run, so when a run is finished, the runner usually just lets the final cutscene play.
July 29th, 2023 at 5:15 p.m. New world record! Woo! Woo! Sorry.
The Soul Stone burns with Hellfire as an eerie red glow blurs your vision. Fresh blood flows into your eyes, and you begin to hear the tormented whispers of the damned. You have done what you knew must be done. The essence of Diablo is contained. For now. You pray that you have become strong enough to contain the demon and keep him at bay. Although you have been fortified by your quest, you can still feel him, clawing his way up from the dark recesses of your soul. Fighting to retain control, your thoughts turn toward the ancient mystic lands of the Far East. Perhaps there, beyond the desolate wastes of Aranok, you will find an answer. Or perhaps, salvation.
Or perhaps... freedom!
This concludes Xavier's run. If you want to see more of him, check the video description for links to his stuff. Time for some special thanks. Most importantly to Xavier for helping me with the video, making sure that it is accurate. But also thanks to Xavier Commentator for additional technical insights and also reviewing the video to verify its accuracy. And then I want to thank two people that taught me most of the speedrun stress and technicalities over 3 years ago when I first got into speedrunning this game. Xavier and Krzysiek. Wait a moment.